James Wheeler, your information. Today's information.
What I'm about to tell you changes everything we thought we knew about the balance of power between Washington and Moscow. On January 9th, 2026, Russia launched its Oreshnik hypersonic missile for only the second time in history. And what happened next exposed something the mainstream media will never tell you. This wasn't just another attack on Ukraine. This was Vladimir Putin sending a message directly to Donald Trump, to NATO, and to every European capital that thinks American protection means anything anymore. I've been covering geopolitical conflicts for decades, and I can tell you from sources on the ground and analysts I've spoken with this week, what we witnessed was nothing less than the announcement of a new world order. The era of unchallenged American military supremacy is over, and the proof is a missile traveling at Mach 10 that no Western system can stop. Let me break down exactly what happened, and why every mainstream outlet is either ignoring the real story or deliberately lying to you about what it means. To understand the significance of January 9th, you need to understand what the Oreshnik actually is. This isn't some upgraded Soviet-era weapon. This is a next-generation intermediate-range ballistic missile that travels at over 12,000 kilometers per hour. It carries 6 independently targetable warheads, each containing multiple submunitions. When it enters the upper atmosphere, it becomes invisible to Ukrainian air defenses. And here's what they don't want you to know. Not a single system currently deployed by NATO in Europe can intercept it. The only missiles designed to counter this type of threat are Israel's Arrow 3 and the American SM-3 Block 2A. Neither exists in Ukraine, neither is deployed in Poland, neither protects Berlin or Paris. The Pentagon quietly acknowledged this reality. Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh identified the Oreshnik as a variant of the RS-26 Rubej, an intermediate-range ballistic missile that Russia tested multiple times but never deployed until now. Western analysts believe Russia removed a booster stage to reduce range while reorienting the system toward conventional rather than nuclear payloads. But make no mistake, this weapon can carry nuclear warheads. Putin has made that abundantly clear. The range estimates vary between 3,500 and 5,400 kilometers. That puts every major European city within striking distance. The mainstream media reported this as just another Russian attack. 4 dead in Kyiv, 22 wounded. Tragic, yes, but routine after 4 years of war. What they didn't tell you is what this attack really meant. Putin launched this weapon from Kapustin Yar, the same test range near the Caspian Sea, where Russia develops its most advanced military technology. He targeted Lviv, in western Ukraine, near the Polish border. This was the first time a ballistic missile hit Lviv Oblast in the entire war. Why would Russia suddenly target the far west of Ukraine with its most expensive, most advanced weapon? The answer becomes clear when you look at what happened in the days before. Donald Trump had been on what his administration called a diplomatic offensive. His envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, flew to Moscow. They sat with Putin in the Kremlin for 4 hours. They emerged claiming progress. Meanwhile, Trump met Zelensky in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum. Both leaders called the meeting good. Witkoff went on television saying they were down to one final issue. The administration projected confidence. A deal was close, they said. History was being made. And then Russia launched the Oreshnik. This is what the media won't explain. Putin's response to Trump's diplomacy wasn't a peace agreement. It was a hypersonic missile. While American envoys were still celebrating their Kremlin photo ops, Russian forces were loading a weapon that can reach Warsaw in minutes and London in not much longer. The European Union's foreign policy chief said it herself. Putin's reply to diplomacy was more missiles and destruction. But here's where the story gets even more revealing. Russia claimed the Oreshnik launch was retaliation for a Ukrainian drone attack on one of Putin's personal residences in the Novgorod region. 91 drones, the Kremlin said, targeted the Russian president himself. Foreign Minister Lavrov called it an assassination attempt. Russia demanded the world take notice. They even staged a dramatic handover of supposed drone debris to the American military attaché in Moscow, with cameras rolling to capture the moment. There's just one problem. It never happened. U.S. intelligence, including the CIA, investigated the claim and concluded definitively that no attack occurred on Putin's residence. Ukrainian forces were targeting a military facility elsewhere in the Novgorod region, far from Putin's Valdai estate. The facility was a legitimate military target. Putin's residence was never in danger. Trump himself rejected the Russian claim publicly. "I don't believe that strike happened," he told reporters. "We've been able to check." Zelensky called it a complete fabrication. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, accused Russia of promoting unfounded claims and called it a deliberate distraction. But by then, the pretext had served its purpose. Russia had its excuse. So let me make sure you understand what actually occurred. Putin fabricated an attack on himself to justify launching his most advanced weapon. He created a fictional narrative of Ukrainian aggression to provide cover for what was really a demonstration of power aimed at the West. And the mainstream media largely repeated the Russian claim without questioning it. This is information warfare in real time. This is how empires manipulate public perception. And this is why you need independent journalists who will tell you the truth. Now let's talk about what this Oreshnik demonstration actually accomplished for Putin. In December 2025, Russia deployed these missiles to eastern Belarus at the Khrushchev 6 aerodrome, just 5 kilometers from the Russian border. From that position, Oreshnik can reach Tallinn, Riga, Warsaw, and beyond. Every NATO member in Eastern Europe is now within range of a weapon they cannot intercept. The entire architecture of European security, built over 30 years since the end of the Cold War, has been rendered obsolete by a single Russian missile system. Think about what this means for NATO's Article 5 guarantee. If Russia strikes Estonia, what exactly can NATO do in response? Launch a nuclear war? Accept the humiliation? The comfortable assumptions that have governed European security since 1949 are now being tested by a weapon system that didn't exist 2 years ago. A retired British military analyst I've been following put it bluntly. It makes no sense for Russia to use an expensive hypersonic weapon against infrastructure. They've been hitting successfully with drones. This was purely political messaging. If we can fly it this far, Putin is saying, we can fly it to any European capital, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha called the strike close to EU and NATO border a grave threat to the security of the European continent and a test for the transatlantic community. He demanded strong responses to Russia's reckless actions. But what response can they give? Strongly worded statements? More sanctions that Russia has already learned to circumvent? The Europeans are trapped between the rhetoric and the reality. But the humiliation of American power didn't start with the Oreshnik. To really understand what's happening, you need to look at what happened in Venezuela just days before. On January 3rd, 2026, the United States launched airstrikes across northern Venezuela and captured President Nicolás Maduro along with his wife, Celia Flores. American commandos flew them to New York, where Maduro was arraigned on drug trafficking charges. The mainstream media celebrated this as a decisive American victory. Regime change in our hemisphere. A blow against authoritarianism. A demonstration of American resolve. But watch closely what actually happened in the aftermath. Russia's foreign ministry called it an unacceptable act of armed aggression. They demanded Maduro's release. They called for a UN Security Council meeting. And then, nothing. Putin himself said nothing. The man who has positioned himself as the leader of global resistance to American imperialism watched his ally get captured and extracted to face American justice, and he stayed silent. Why would Putin not respond to such a direct challenge? Because he couldn't. Russia's conventional military is stretched to its limits in Ukraine. Putin doesn't have the resources for another foreign adventure. He had to swallow the Venezuela humiliation and wait for his moment. The limits on Russian capabilities explain much of this muted response. Russia may be a nuclear superpower, but its conventional military has limited ability to project power across the Atlantic. That moment came 6 days later with the Oreshnik. What Putin couldn't do in Venezuela, where geography and military logistics favor America, he did in Europe, where Russian power is undeniable. He demonstrated that while the United States can grab a leader in South America, they cannot protect their allies from Russian missiles. The empire won a battle in Caracas, but they lost the strategic war in the skies over Ukraine. And here's what really should worry Washington. The Americans didn't even try to trade. Before the Venezuela operation, many analysts expected a potential deal. You can have Maduro, some thought Moscow might propose, if we get favorable terms on Ukraine. But Washington moved forward without any negotiation. They didn't think they needed Russian permission to act in the Western Hemisphere. The capture of Maduro revealed that Washington doesn't view Russia as an equal partner in global affairs. The Atlantic Council analysis put it directly. The fact that the United States moved forward with the ousting of Maduro without pursuing a Ukraine for Venezuela trade is likely a setback for the Kremlin. Simply put, Washington did not have to trade Kyiv for Caracas. That's diplomatic language for saying America treated Russia as irrelevant to its hemispheric decisions. Putin's response was to prove that in the arena that matters most, the capacity to threaten the heart of Europe, Russia is not just equal. Russia is superior. Now let me tell you about what happened in those diplomatic meetings that Trump's team is still trying to spin as progress. The first trilateral talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States since the war began took place in Abu Dhabi on January 23rd and 24th. This was supposed to be the breakthrough moment. Nearly 4 years of war, hundreds of thousands dead, and finally, all parties at the same table. After 4 hours in the Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov stated clearly that Putin's territorial demands remain unchanged. Without resolving the territorial issue, he said, there is no hope of achieving a long-term settlement. Russia wants all of Donbass. Russia wants guarantees that Ukraine will never join NATO. Russia wants recognition of Crimea. These demands haven't changed since the beginning of the war. 4 hours of negotiations changed nothing. The Institute for the Study of War stated bluntly that the Kremlin has been delaying the peace process for months in order to protract the war and achieve Russia's original war aims through military means. In Davos, according to the Financial Times, the Zelensky-Trump meeting was a failure for the Ukrainian president. No agreement on security guarantees. No commitment on the $800 billion reconstruction package that European and American officials had been discussing. The territory issue remains unsolved. Zelensky left Switzerland with handshakes and photo opportunities, but nothing concrete. In fact, Zelensky was so frustrated that he publicly criticized Europe in his Davos speech. Instead of taking the lead in defending freedom worldwide, he said, "Europe looks lost, trying to convince the US president to change." Think about that. The leader of a country fighting for survival is calling out his own allies for incompetence. That's how bad things have gotten. And what was Trump's response to his failed diplomacy? He blamed Zelensky. The American president publicly stated that Ukraine, not Russia, is holding up the peace deal. Putin is ready to end the war, Trump claimed. Zelensky is the obstacle. The Kremlin immediately agreed with Trump's assessment. Moscow agrees with Trump that Ukraine is holding up peace deal, the Russian statement read. Think about what this means. The President of the United States is now echoing Russian talking points to explain why his peace deal isn't working. He's blaming the country being invaded rather than the invader. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk had to publicly contradict him. It is Russia who rejected the peace plan prepared by the US, Tusk posted. Not Zelensky. The only Russian response was further missile attacks on Ukrainian cities. This is what humiliation looks like in real time. Trump promised to end this war in 24 hours. Now he's making excuses that sound like they came from Moscow's press office. He's pointing fingers at everyone except the country that actually invaded. But the story doesn't end with failed diplomacy and hypersonic missiles. There's a deeper structural shift happening that threatens American power at its very foundation. The BRICS alliance, led by Russia and China, has been working for years to create alternatives to the dollar-dominated global financial system. In 2026, those efforts are bearing fruit. Russia and China now settle approximately 90% of their bilateral trade in rubles and yuan. The dollar has been cut out entirely. The BRICS pay system has reduced dollar usage in trade between member nations by roughly 2/3. The BRICS unit was launched in 2026, backed 40% by gold and 60% by member currencies. This isn't theoretical anymore. It's operational. 23 countries have submitted applications to join the alliance. Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Indonesia have already become full members. The bloc now represents 11 nations with more than half the world's population and a massive share of global resources. Russia, China, and India are collaborating on CBDC interoperability frameworks, linking their digital ruble, yuan, and rupee. They're building the infrastructure for a world that doesn't need the dollar to function. Every wire transfer that bypasses SWIFT, every oil sale denominated in yuan, every bilateral agreement settled in local currencies chips away at American financial hegemony. The petrodollar system that has underpinned American financial hegemony for 50 years is being dismantled piece by piece, and the people doing the dismantling are getting more organized, more sophisticated, and more numerous every year. Trump's response? Threaten 100% tariffs on any BRICS country pursuing de-dollarization. But this threat is empty. You cannot tariff countries out of protecting their own economic sovereignty. You cannot sanction nations that have already built alternative payment systems. The tools that worked against isolated countries like Cuba or Venezuela don't work against a bloc representing half the world's population and a third of global GDP. This is the context in which the Oreshnik was launched. This is why Putin felt confident enough to humiliate American diplomacy and fabricate a pretext for military escalation. Russia is not alone. Russia is leading a global coalition that is systematically building a world where American power means less every single day. Let me bring this all together and explain what it means for you. The Oreshnik missile is not just a weapon, it's a symbol. It represents the end of an era where American military technology guaranteed European security. Every NATO defense minister knows the truth, even if they won't say it publicly. If Putin decides to strike any European capital, there is nothing they can currently do to stop it. The security guarantee that has held since 1949 now depends entirely on Russian restraint. The failed negotiations are not just diplomatic setbacks. They reveal a fundamental miscalculation at the heart of American foreign policy. Trump believed that Putin needed a deal, that sanctions and military pressure had weakened Russia enough to force compromises. Instead, Putin demonstrated that he can wait indefinitely while advancing on the battlefield and expanding his alliances. The pressure is not on Moscow. The pressure is on Washington. The Venezuela operation, for all its tactical success, exposed the limits of American power projection. The United States can act unilaterally in its own hemisphere, but it cannot protect its position in Europe or Asia. Maduro is in a New York courtroom, but Putin is launching hypersonic missiles, and Xi Jinping is watching closely for lessons to apply in Taiwan. The de-dollarization movement is not a future threat. It's happening now. Every day, more trade happens outside the dollar system. Every day, the leverage that comes from controlling global finance diminishes. The empire built on the petrodollar is watching its foundation erode. What does this mean for you, wherever you are watching this? It means the world you grew up in is ending. The rules that governed international relations for 70 years are being rewritten. The institutions that promised security and stability are failing. And the people who told you they had everything under control are being exposed as either liars or fools. This is not the narrative you'll hear on mainstream news. They'll tell you negotiations are progressing. They'll tell you the alliance is strong. They'll tell you American leadership remains unchallenged. They're lying to you. Or they don't understand what's happening. I'm not sure which is worse. The multipolar world is not coming. It's here. Russia and China and the global south are not waiting for permission to build alternatives to American hegemony. They're doing it. The Oreshnik is the punctuation mark on that statement. So what happens next? In the short term, expect more missile attacks on Ukraine. Expect more failed diplomatic initiatives that get spun as progress. Expect more European leaders expressing concern while doing nothing concrete. The pattern is set. Putin has shown he will fabricate pretexts when he needs them. He will launch devastating weapons while negotiators are still talking. He will wait out Western pressure because he knows time is on his side. The battlefield situation favors Russia. The economic alternatives are growing. The Western alliance is divided. In the medium term, watch the BRICS summit in India later this year. Watch for more countries joining the de-dollarization movement. Watch for the alternative financial systems to gain more capacity and legitimacy. The architecture of the New World Order is being built in plain sight. In the longer term, understand that empires don't die quietly. The American empire will thrash and struggle and lash out as its power diminishes. There will be more Venezuelas. There will be provocations and interventions and attempts to reassert dominance through force. But the trajectory is clear. The unipolar moment that began in 1991 is ending. Let me tell you something that puts all of this in perspective. 30 years of American military investment in missile defense systems, trillions of dollars spent, thousands of engineers and scientists working on the problem, and a single Russian missile can now bypass all of it. The Patriot systems, the THAAD batteries, the Aegis destroyers, none of them can touch the Oreshnik. This isn't a failure of a single weapons program. This is the collapse of an entire strategic doctrine. For decades, American foreign policy has rested on the assumption that superior technology would always guarantee military dominance. That assumption died over Lviv on January 9th, and everyone in the Pentagon knows it, even if they won't say it publicly. The Europeans know it too. That's why their responses have been so hollow. What can they say? We condemn the attack, and by the way, we have no way to defend ourselves if Putin decides to target us next. The emperor has no clothes, and the entire continent is starting to realize it. Meanwhile, China is watching closely. Every lesson Russia learns about hypersonic warfare, every vulnerability in Western defenses that gets exposed, Beijing takes note. Taiwan is watching. South Korea is watching. Japan is watching. The entire American alliance system in the Pacific is built on the same assumption of technological superiority that just got demolished in Ukraine. This is why the Oreshnik matters beyond this single conflict. It's not just about Russia and Ukraine. It's about the fundamental question of whether American military power can still guarantee the security of its allies anywhere in the world. And right now, the evidence suggests it cannot. What can you do with this information? First, share it. The mainstream media is not going to tell this story accurately. Independent journalism depends on people like you spreading the truth. Second, support outlets that report reality instead of official narratives. Third, question everything you hear from government sources and establishment media. They have every incentive to maintain the illusion of American strength. You have every reason to see through it. The empire will not stop lying. The military-industrial complex will not stop profiting from conflict. The politicians will not stop promising peace while preparing for war. But you can stop believing them. You can start seeing the world as it actually is. Putin's Oreshnik didn't just destroy infrastructure in Lviv. It destroyed the last pretense of American military invincibility. Trump's diplomatic failures didn't just embarrass his administration. They exposed the hollowness of American foreign policy promises. The capture of Maduro didn't demonstrate American strength. It showed that even when the empire wins, it doesn't change the fundamental shift in global power. The multipolar world is being born. The global south is rising. The dollar's dominance is fading, and no amount of missiles or sanctions or propaganda can stop it. This is the reality that the establishment doesn't want you to understand. This is what they're hiding behind their carefully crafted narratives. Now you know. The question is what you'll do with that knowledge. Keep watching. Keep questioning. Keep sharing the truth. Because the world is changing faster than anyone in Washington wants to admit, and the only defense against their lies is information. Real information. The kind they don't want you to have. That's what's at stake. That's what you need to follow. And that's why I'll keep reporting the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes the powerful. The empire won't silence us. The multipolar future is inevitable, and you deserve to know what's really happening while it unfolds.